You know, we often think of history in terms of big battles and famous names, right? But sometimes the real story, the grand sweep of history, is tucked away in the quiet details of a single life. Today, we're going to look at one such man, a colonial craftsman whose final will was written just as his entire world was about to be torn apart and remade by revolution. So this is the document that kicks everything off. It's an abstract of the will of John Williams, a shoemaker from Shrewsbury, New Jersey. And I mean, just look at that date it was proved. April 19, 1776. Wow. This isn't just some legal paperwork, you guys. It's a snapshot, a moment frozen in time, taken at the precise moment a colonial family was becoming an American one. So to really get who John Williams was, we've got to go back. We need to understand the world that forged him. See, this wasn't a man who just appeared out of nowhere. He was the product of generations who had carved a life right out of the New Jersey wilderness. And this timeline, I mean, it tells such a powerful story. You've got John's grandfather showing up when Monmouth County was, a raw, heavily forested frontier. Then his dad, Daniel, is one of the very first European kids born there. So by the time our John Williams comes along in 1705, things have changed. The family isn't just trying to survive anymore. They're woven right into the fabric of this colonial society. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. John's father, Daniel, lived to be 91 years old. Can you imagine the changes he saw? He literally watched this place transform from a wild frontier into a stable, pre-revolutionary society. He was the living bridge between those first tough years and the world his son, our craftsman, would help to build. Okay, so that brings us to John himself and his place in this world. He didn't just follow in his family's farming footsteps. Nope. He took that foundation and built something new on it. He became a highly skilled artisan. Yeah, that key word in his will is cordwainer. And you might be thinking, what's that? Well, it's not just a cobbler who patches up old shoes. No way. A cordwainer was a true master craftsman. He made new shoes from scratch. And think about it. In a world where pretty much everyone walked everywhere, this was an absolutely critical, highly respected job. And this just shows you how the whole colonial economy worked together like a little ecosystem. To become a cordwainer, John would have had to go through a long, tough apprenticeship. His entire business relied on getting good leather, which means he had this natural connection with the local tanners. And this is the best part, look at how the tradition gets passed down. His own son, Daniel, becomes a tanner. He's literally preparing the raw material that his father would have used. It's this perfect little vocational loop. All right, so we've got his family history. We've got his job. But who was John Williams the person? Well, believe it or not, the records actually paint a pretty clear picture of his family and his life in the community. So John's family life was shaped by two key women. His first wife was Rebecca Christopher, and she was the mother of his older kids, including Daniel, the one who'd carry on the family trade. But after Rebecca passed away, he married Hannah Scott, and she's the one who would be with him at the end, and the one left with the huge task of carrying out his final wishes. And in that will, he names his 6 children, the ones who would inherit his world. 4 sons, James, Asher, Daniel, and Matthew, and his 2 daughters, Hannah and Phoebe. But John makes it really clear that there was someone else in his care, someone he saw as family. Okay, this might be my favorite line in the entire document. It's so simple, but it says so much. He writes, "And Rachel Scott, whom I have brought up." Just like that. With those few words, he extends his family, his legacy, beyond just blood. It's this beautiful little window into his character, right? It shows his sense of responsibility. He wasn't just looking out for his biological kids, he was looking out for the child he raised. All right, so let's circle back to the will itself. Now remember, he wrote it in 1769. Things were getting tense with Great Britain for sure, but it wasn't all-out war yet. So this will, it reflects a world that kind of assumed things would just keep going as they were, a world that was frankly about to disappear forever. Yeah, let's just hammer these dates home one more time because they're so important. He writes the will in 1769. 7 years later, it's proved, it's made official. What happened in those 7 years? Oh, just the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, and the first shots of the Revolution at Lexington and Concord. This document is a perfect time capsule, dreamed up in a colonial world, but born into a revolutionary one. So how did he split everything up? This table makes it super clear. First, his wife Hannah gets to use everything, the house, the land, all of it, for as long as she's his widow. Then his oldest son, James, gets a specific cash gift of £10.
But then after Hannah's time is done, the whole shebang, the entire estate is sold, and the money is split equally among his other 5 kids and, crucially, Rachel Scott. He made sure everyone got an equal piece of the pie.
So, you're probably wondering, wait, why did he give his wife the use of the land but not actual ownership? Well, this was actually super common back in the 18th century. It was a way to make sure the widow was taken care of, that she had a roof over her head for the rest of her life, while at the same time guaranteeing that the family property would eventually and safely pass down to the kids to the next generation.
I mean, the timing is just, you can't make this stuff up. The final legal act of John Williams's life happens at the exact moment the United States is being born. It really is the final stitch, like something a Cordwainer himself would do, completing the pattern of a life lived entirely in colonial America. But, of course, the story doesn't end there. The big question is, what happened next? Did the family make it through the chaos of the Revolutionary War? Did that legacy he so carefully planned actually last?
And here's the amazing part. We can actually answer that question. The story isn't lost to history. It's right there, preserved in another set of dusty old records, the Shrewsbury tax ratables, basically the town's tax lists. And they give us this amazingly clear snapshot of where the Williams family stood right after the war. Okay, check this out. It's 1779, just 3 years after John died, and you can see his plan working perfectly. There's his widow, Hannah, managing the main household with 35 acres. And right there with her are the sons. Daniel the tanner has his own 30 acres, and his brother Matthew has a smaller piece of land. The family is stable, they're working the land, they made it through the storm. And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the absolute proof of John's lasting impact. On the left, we've got the abstract of John's will from 1776. And on the right, that's the will of his son, Daniel the tanner, written almost 2 decades later in 1795. And right there, in black and white, is the smoking gun. In his own will, Daniel specifically mentions the legacy left me by my father, John Williams. That's it. That's the direct link across the generations. The foundation that John so carefully built, the property and the stability he passed on, it wasn't just inherited. It was remembered. It was acknowledged. And it became the starting point for his family's journey into a brand new nation. So, what's the big takeaway here? John Williams never signed the Declaration of Independence. He didn't command an army. He was a craftsman, a shoemaker. He raised a family, and he wrote a will. And yet, his story, this one quiet life, shows us how history is really made. It's not always about the big flashy events. So often, it's about the steady, quiet work of generations building a legacy for the future, one careful stitch at a time.